Have you ever wondered why happiness never seems to last? You finally get that thing you've always wanted, the dream job, the perfect relationship, the new car, and for a while, everything feels amazing. But then, slowly, the excitement fades. The thrill that once made your heart race becomes ordinary, and you find yourself searching for the next thing to make you happy again. But why does this happen? Well, from an evolutionary point of view, it kinda makes sense. Animals get a rush of dopamine whenever they do something that advances their evolutionary interests and moves them ahead in the game of life. For instance, food and sex give pleasure, and that pleasure serves as a reinforcer that motivates them to repeat those actions in the future, like searching for more food or sex. However, for humans, the game is more complex. People win at the game of life by achieving high status and a good reputation, cultivating friendships, finding the best mate, accumulating resources, and rearing their children to be successful at the same game. People have many goals and therefore many sources of pleasure, so you'd think we would receive an enormous and long-lasting shot of dopamine whenever we succeed at an important goal. But no, we don't. That's why the progress principle was introduced. More pleasure comes more from making progress toward goals than from achieving them. In other words, when it comes to goal pursuit, it really is the journey that counts, not the destination. Shakespeare captured it perfectly. Things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing. But from a psychology point of view, the reason happiness doesn't last is even more fascinating than you think. Now, if I gave you 10 seconds to name the very best and very worst things that could ever happen to you, you might say something like, becoming a famous celebrity and losing your eyesight. Becoming famous would bring wealth, admiration, and opportunities to do what you love. And you'd think that it will bring lasting happiness rather than one blast of dopamine, right? On the other hand, losing your eyesight would feel like losing independence. You'd have to give up many activities you enjoy, rely on others for help, and adjust to a completely different way of life. Many people think they'd rather die than be blind, but they're wrong. Of course, it's better to become famous than to lose your eyesight, but not as much as you'd expect. Why? Because no matter what happens, you'll likely adapt to it, but you don't realize that ahead of time. We're bad at predicting how we'll feel in the future, a skill called affective forecasting. We grossly overestimate the intensity and the duration of our emotional reactions. Here's the crazy part. Within a year, both the famous celebrity and the person who lost their eyesight will on average return close to their baseline level of happiness. The celebrity buys a mansion, travels the world, and enjoys the spotlight. At first, the contrast with their old life feels thrilling, but after a few months, the excitement fades. The human mind is highly sensitive to changes in conditions, not to absolute levels. The celebrity's happiness comes from rising to fame, not from staying at that high level. Over time, the luxuries become normal, and the celebrity takes them for granted. Or even worse, fame can harm relationships. Friends, family, and strangers may swarm around, asking for money, favors, or attention. Many celebrities end up feeling isolated, needing to move or cut ties with people. Some even join support groups to cope with the challenges of fame. Still, most would say they're glad they became famous. On the other hand, the person who lost their eyesight faces a huge emotional blow at first. They grieve the life they once had and the dreams they can no longer pursue. But like the celebrity, their mind adapts. They start setting new, smaller goals and find joy in progress, like learning to navigate the world in new ways. Each small step forward brings satisfaction, thanks to the progress principle. This is the adaptation principle at work. People's judgments about their present state are based on whether it is better or worse than the state to which they have become used to. Adaptation is in part just a property of neurons. Nerve cells react strongly to new things, but over time they get used to them and respond less. Change is what grabs our attention and gives us important information, not things that stay the same. Humans take adaptation to another level. We don't just get used to things, we adjust our expectations. We set goals for ourselves, and every time we reach one, we set a new one. After a series of successes, we aim higher. After a major setback like a serious injury, we aim lower. Instead of following the advice of Buddhism and Stoicism to let go of attachments and accept life as it comes, we fill our lives with goals, hopes, and expectations, and then feel happy or sad based on how well we're doing in reaching them. When we combine the idea of adaptation with the fact that happiness levels are mostly inherited, we reach a surprising conclusion. In the long run, what happens to you doesn't matter much. Whether you experience good luck or bad, you'll always return to your natural happiness set point, your brain's default level of happiness, which is mostly determined by your genes. Back in 1759, long before anyone knew about genes, Adam Smith reached the same conclusion. In every permanent situation where there is no expectation of change, the mind of every man, in a longer or shorter time, returns to its natural and usual state of tranquility. In prosperity, after a certain time, it falls back to that state. In adversity, after a certain time, it rises up to it. If this idea is true, then we're all stuck on what's called the hedonic treadmill. On an exercise treadmill, you can increase the speed as much as you want, but you stay in the same place. In life, no matter how hard you work or how much wealth, success, or pleasure you gain, you can't truly get ahead. Why? Because you can't change your natural level of happiness. The more you achieve, the more your expectations rise, leaving you no happier than before. Yet, without realizing how pointless this chase is, we keep striving, doing things that help us succeed in life. Always wanting more than we have, we keep running and running, like hamsters on a wheel. If this is the case, then how do we find lasting happiness? Well, if you want me to make a video on that, let me know in the comments. See you in the next one.